Oh boy, this one is gonna be a tough one, especially when you realized how they massacred my boy. Excuse my melodramatic language earlier, but I really don't know what's up with Square Enix and these PS1 ports. I mean, why are they doing such a poor job while they remaster their best games and cult classics? What's the purpose of ruining the legends that help you rule the gaming world by doing half-ass work? Good old Squaresoft would probably bitch slap themselves to death if they would only knew what they've become. You must be thinking, what in the name of all that is holy did Square Enix do to deserve such an entrance from me? And you'd be right. From a surface this looks like a nice package. You get a cult classic such as Chrono Cross remastered and packaged together with The Radical Dreamers that was never released outside Japan. But when you scratch the surface, a plethora of problems awaits. Let me start by saying this. I love Chrono Cross, and I've played it so many times over the years. Ever since I got to play it, I was mesmerized by the tropical atmosphere of El Nido Archipelago paired with one of the best soundtracks in gaming history, hands down. I believe Chrono Cross's soundtrack was Yasunori Mitsuda's finest hour. A peak. A masterpiece of masterpieces bar none. Just dare to prove me otherwise. I loved the characters, at least some of them out of the vast array of 40-something of them. Loved the story even though it's extremely complicated just for the sake of being complicated. I think it's easier to dismantle an atomic bomb than to try to understand the Chrono Cross story, even after few beatings of the game. Luckily, there is this awesome site called Chrono Compendium that offers a detailed explanation of the story. Some of you will even after the explanation be puzzled a bit. But I won't blame you, it's that hard to comprehend. Let me tell you a sacrilegious statement. I love Chrono Cross more than Chrono Trigger. Sorry, but I do. I cried for decades for another sequel, as many of us older fans did. I remember all of the teasing about Chrono Break in the year 2002 and 2003, but that was just it. A speculated supposed name and nothing else. The more years have come to pass, the less I cried, or to be realistic, whined about the sequel. I mean, when a lot of time passes by, maybe it's better to leave a legend intact in the past. From that perspective, you will at least have a fond memories of untarnished franchise. On top of that, probably part of the development team is no longer in Square Enix, so the magic would probably be gone and the sequel would be ruined. But, given the current state of affairs in Square Enix, I guess they want to capitalize on all of their franchises that are turning big rounded anniversaries by doing ports and remasters. It was only a matter of time when they will pick up Chrono Cross. They already did the Trigger and it was a lazy port. They did Final Fantasy 7, 8 and 9 and they were all lazy ports. They announced Chrono Cross Radical Dreamers Edition and they will include SNES's translated version of Radical Dreamers. Whoa, this actually doesn't sound lazy. Can it be true? Can it be that Square Enix is actually gonna do it properly? Yeah. Let's see how it goes. Okay, let's keep on the positive note here. First of all, you are greeted with this menu screen. I rather like it. I like a group picture and these newly redone tunes that are playing in the background. I think this was the thing that made gamers upset that the entire soundtrack will be retouched and maybe butchered. Luckily for all of us, Square decided to keep the originals and probably fiddle with remastering and increasing the dynamic range, because the soundtrack sounds even better now. Of course, before the start of the game, you need to check the settings to see what this edition has to offer. I totally welcome a widescreen ratio and a new graphic style even though there is a classic setting. But let's be real, what's the point of original setting if you buy a remaster? It's like paying $5,000 for a high-end PC just to play a Minecraft. Of course you want to refine it as much as you can and put it in the most ferocious setting possible. Okay, there is nothing so ferocious about filtering a 23-year-old PS1 game, but you get a picture. As you start the Chrono Cross, you'll see the screen for control scheme, which is nice, and then the intro rolls in. It's apparent that the letters are new and sharp, which is totally nice, and the overall FMV sequence is a bit filtered and sharper than PS1 version. But still, it's too far from being perfect. Watch it on a 4K big screen TV and you will start to wonder if you have developed a short-sightedness. This also raised a question in my mind. Was Square Enix really that nonchalant with keeping the original masters, FMVs and pre-rendered backgrounds of many of their JRPGs in high resolution? Haven't they heard about backing it all up? I mean, as a last resort, backgrounds can be brutally sharpened using specialized third-party AI programs, and there are plenty of successful examples to be found online. But Square Enix obviously didn't want to do it. What they did in Chrono Cross is, they used these effects to make it all look like a mixture of oil and watercolor pictures or pastels. And it's a mixed bag. Some backgrounds look alright, but some of them are just murky and blurry. But to counter this all up, Square did a great job in altering text box faces of the characters. They look more anime-like and they are pretty good. Text boxes are sharp and the new font is really good, so there is really no complaining there. They nailed it. Also, 3D models of characters have got the same treatment as the characters in Final Fantasy VIII and they look great. They're not just rendered in more detail. Some parts, for example eyes and certain clothes, are made new from ground up and they look awesome. In some of the moments in the game, it looks like an early PlayStation 2 title. Just check him out in the video right now. Every 3D object looks better because I guess it's easier to work on them and refine them. So far so good, right? Good stuff outweighs the bad. But now comes the worst part of the game that hinders the whole experience and puts Square Enix to shame once again when it comes to remasters and ports. An infamous frame rate. Chrono Cross Radical Dreamers Edition is quite frankly atrocious when it comes to FPS. Let me explain it. In a smaller environments with a few characters, it's fine, it runs great. But as soon as anything unexpected happens, such as more enemies on screen, bigger environments and such, FPS drops rapidly and so much stuttering is going on that it's not even funny. Sometimes this creates an involuntary blur effect when characters run. The battles are suffering the same fate. Fight against one or two enemies in a smaller environment with a few 3D objects in the background and the FPS is fine. The more enemies and more stuff goes on, FPS drops hard on its knees and the entire battle is so choppy it hurts the untrained eyes. Throw some big animation elements here and there and it's just insufferable. Take a look at this clip now. The same environment. SS Invincible ship battles upon your arrival on the ship. The battleground is a big 3D element in the form of a ship deck surrounded by fog and moving sea. When you battle multiple enemies or big ones such as this bird Polly, look at the frame rate. It's so damn choppy. But now look at the battle with Fargo. Notice how everything is smooth now. The environment is still the same, but everything performs much better. We are talking about PlayStation 1 game that is 3 or 4 generations behind, depending on what system you play now. This remaster should be locked up at 60 FPS on a resolution of, I don't know, 16K, let alone 4K. But no, we get this inconsistent mess. Still, could be worse. Yes, it could. According to Digital Foundry, Chrono Cross Radical Dreamers Edition actually performs worse than the PS1 original. Even Duckstation emulation runs better than this edition. You can check my gameplay video in a link in the description to see it. Now, how cool is that? Thank you Square for ruining yet another legend. Another slightly redeeming factor should be the inclusion of SNES title The Radical Dreamers. Remember, this game was only available for Super Famicom back in the day in the year 1996, but only as a Satellaview download. Now, how advanced does that sound, huh? This made it so obscure that only die-hard fans knew what this game was all about, since it's a visual text-based novel. An unofficial translation was made for everybody who wanted to fill the gap between Trigger and Cross. But it looks like many of the story elements in Radical Dreamers and characters were used in Chrono Cross due to Masaru Kado's dissatisfaction of the game. Let's see how Radical Dreamers behave in this new edition. As you'd expect, SNES translated port works flawlessly. I mean, it's a visual novel, so it would be kinda tragic if this doesn't go as planned. If you're old enough to remember text adventures on the PCs of the 1980s, this is almost the same. Okay, it has some graphical images, but in essence, that's it. You read a lot of text, and then sometimes a battle occurs where you choose what to do and game story decides if you win or lose. If you played Chrono Cross before, you'll see a lot of familiar names. Kid, Surge, Lynx, General Viper and more of them are here. But the plot is somewhat different. You immediately start with Kid, Surge and Magil. I feel like Magil is a mixture of Magus of Chrono Trigger and future Ghoul of Chrono Cross. There are some changes, as for example, you are invading Lynx's castle and Riddle is daughter of Lynx, instead of raiding Viper Manor where Riddle is a daughter of Lord Viper. So there's proof right there that this game was probably a foundation and inspiration for Chrono Cross. Even some of the soundtrack numbers are the same, for example, Battle Theme and Castle and Viper Manor theme. Is it really necessary to play this before Cross? Nope. Is it really necessary to play it at all? This is just a service for die-hard fans. Others will probably ignore the game as soon as they realize that most of the time they'll read tons of texts. After all has been said and done, what's the conclusion? Remember that I've said that I love Chrono Cross, but would I recommend this edition to you? No, absolutely not. It's a matter of principles. You do not do such a shoddy job and expect to get away with it for how many times? Even though game costs like $20 or so, it's still unacceptable. I was playing PlayStation 5 version, just to be clear, and PC version suffers from the same fate. I'm not so sure about Nintendo Switch version, even though everybody say it's probably the best system for this edition to play. I don't know. Will Square patch things up? I don't know that either. For PC, modders will probably sort it out, but we PlayStation 5 players? What about us? To sum it up again, the answer is still no. Don't buy it. Maybe on a big percentage sale when it will cost a dime. I sacrificed myself and my $20, so you don't have to. Square, don't do this again. Stop this poor port/remaster nonsense. Either do it right or don't. It's that simple. Anyways, thank you for watching this rant review, and until next time.